NBA draft. We're doing it again. We're looking at a bunch of prospects, including maybe potential number one overall pick, Zaccharie Risacher. Michael Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it. Indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd, and for me, a grudge is a place where you pork your core. I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today's episode is not brought to you by anybody, but I am here to tell you and to thank you, actually, for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free. We're available on all platforms. So if you've got a double bang in you, we all have a little bit of double banging, go and throw it this way. Video, audio, thumb, bell, comment, all those things help the show out immensely. Because I don't try to thrive on clickbait on this show, I didn't start the show by telling you, today we're breaking down the NBA prospects of Bronny James, LeBron James Jr. But we are going to talk Bronny. But he's obviously not the main part of what we're doing. But we are going to talk Bronny. We're going to talk Risacher. We're going to talk some other second round prospects as well. I think it's going to be an intriguing discussion. So we might as well just we might as well just bang straight in right now. He's back on the show. We're ready to talk NBA draft. From Locked On NBA Big Board, Leaf Thulin is back on the show. Welcome back, Leaf.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It was fun when I joined last year.
It's good to have you here, get all these different perspectives across all these different draft prospects. I've been asking the guys that we've had on so far in different ways, in different forms, about the overall nature of this class. And the one thing that we always hear is it's a weak draft class, but people don't often say what that means. Like, what does that, A, do you agree with that? Or B, what does it mean to you? How do you contextualize that sort of overriding opinion on the guys in this class?
A, I do agree with it, and B, the way I would describe a weak draft class as one devoid of stars. And if you look at classes in terms of the way that you evaluate, hey, how good is this class? How much depth does this class have? I think the way to assess the top end talent of a class is look how many all-stars there have been, and then how many of them are repeat all-stars. And then if there's a class that's considered weak at the top and the all-stars come from picks like Giannis or Rudy Gobert, like the 2013 class had, which was 15th pick and 27th pick, and that's every all-star nomination but a singular one that went to Victor Oladipo, who's the second pick, I would say that was a weak class at the top because you couldn't have predicted two European prospects from 15 and 27 were going to be superstars in the case of Giannis, and one that's a Hall of Famer in Rudy Gobert. And so the reason I would say this class is weak is I don't see any top 10 guys being the franchise-changing caliber talents that you typically get in a draft class. Like, obviously, Victor Wembanyama is a generational talent, and that's a little bit different in and of itself. But Brandon Miller's a guy I think will be an all-star. I think there's cases to be made in last year's class that there are all-stars that could have been drafted 1 through 6. And then you could get guys that really vastly overachieve, and that creates quality of depth. And Jaime Jaquez, Brandon Podjemski, Keontae George, and so on and so forth. So I think the reason it's a weak class is because of the lack of top-tier talent. I do think there's depth to be found in a lot of the classes, and I think there's more and more depth because the people are getting better at evaluation. So you're going to have fewer just total busts drafted in the lottery or in the first round than you've had in years past. Even if the class isn't as good at the top, pushing what you would consider lesser talent higher in the draft.
I agree. Shout out to Georgios Papagiannis. All right, we are here now to talk prospects, and we're going to start with a European prospect whose name is in the draft buzz circle at the moment because he had a huge game the other day, and that is, of course, Zaccharie Risacher, playing over in the playoffs over in Europe at the moment for JL Borg. Risacher is 19, he's 6'9", he's a wing/forward. The numbers that people can see on the screen there are per 40-minute pace-adjusted stats, which may not be 100% up to date because games are still going on over there. 19 and 6 with 1.6 steals, 22 usage, 44% three-point attempt rate. I've explained to people, Leaf, why I don't like to highlight three-point percentage necessarily. It's more about how many you're getting up, what's your free throw number, what's your overall efficiency, how often you're getting to the line. I think they all seem to be better indicators of three-point shooting success rate. The assist to turnover rate is really low with Risacher. He's a guy that his name was bandied about quite a bit even before the season as a guy in the mix. And for me, he was one of the guys where I just saw wild divergence in opinions. Like, bro, what is this guy? Like, none of these shots go in every team that he's on. He never seems to stand out, but he always gets pumped up. And then had some struggles this season, had a nice second half, had this big game here. Where are you at with Risacher? Because I still can't get a full handle on what he is. Like 54 field goal percentage, it's not bad. Like, you want it a little bit high, but it's not bad. 72 from the line, it's fine. Like, it's okay. He's taking threes. They're sort of going in. I don't really know what he is as a player.
Yeah, I think the reason that there's such a wide variance in opinions is because if some people have him 1, other people have him at 10, and in this class, if you're getting that type of player at 10 in an ordinary class, you're excited, but at 1, excuse me, there's a bunch of questions. If you're drafting that guy at 1, that the best version of the archetype of a kind of a 3-point sniper that's tall, that isn't necessarily a ball dominant guy, is probably Michael Porter Jr. And Michael Porter Jr. is honestly a really good player, but nowhere near an all-star. And if you're drafting that at 1, that doesn't feel like a success. Now, if you draft him at 10, then that feels like a great success. And so I actually see him kind of as a younger version of Cam Johnson, who's right now paid $24 million a year in his second contract, which I would say is a success of a career. And he's a good shooter, and that type of archetype rarely fails inherently, but it's not the type that moves the needle for a team that you draft in the top 5 to feel ecstatic about the pick. Then that's why I think this class is regarded as poorly as it is, because if that's a top 5 pick and it's maybe a safer pick than some others, that gives you pause to draft that type of player in the long run. But I think what he's really good at is he has the measurables and the shooting capacity. At one time during the year, he's about 49% from 3. Then he had a tremendous cold streak, fell down to 35%. He's kind of cool, finding himself in the middle there. He's regressing to the mean or progressing now. And I think he's a guy that'll probably find himself drafted in the top 6 just because there's safety to this draft. And then the way that I think teams will operate is, instead of drafting for home runs, I think they're going to draft for singles, and he could maybe be a double if he hits his potential. But I think he's likely a really solid player, not one with superstar potential, in my opinion, though.
Yeah, I'm not very, at the moment, I'm not very high on him, but again, the way that this class sort of sits is I can't sit here and listen to you say things like, what are you talking about? You're wrong. Like, because I can't get a full grasp on where this is. And I think part of it is also just the way we position a draft. We go, well, if Risacher, if he goes in the top 3, I go, yeah, but this isn't a regular draft. There isn't a top 3 player available in all honesty. Like, is he the 8th best player drafted last season? 10th, maybe. It's annoying that gets slotted into a salary slot and you've wasted this draft capital on it, but what are you going to do? Like, that's just how it's going to go. But it is a hard sort of brain thing to push through, to go, well, you were pick 3 and you were pick 3. Why aren't you the same level of player? And I think that's a little bit of that. Now, in terms of me looking through, I did a bunch of stuff with the top 15 or so prospects to look at statistical shape and rate stats to see who they came out most likely. And the guy that Risacher came out, obviously it's Europe to college, so there's some wonkiness there, but it was Keegan Murray, a guy that did shoot really well in college. Had a pretty strong usage there, has turned into, or had a really good shooting year as a rookie, regressed a little bit. His defense changed. Like, is that like, how outrageous is that? Is it not a best case outcome? Or maybe you do think it is a best case outcome in terms of what Keegan did through college, but also more what he's doing now in the NBA?
Well, that's an interesting one, because Keegan coming out of college, I had questions about how his role would be shaped in the NBA. I figured he'd be a 3-and-D type of guy. That made sense. But in college, he had the ball so much in his hands at Iowa, where he would come off screens and handle, and he'd slash in his freshman year, which isn't the one he came out of, but he was a defender who was an energy guy, and then he developed into this guy. So I said, how real is this? And I think Keegan's been more of a success story than you possibly could have imagined, because going 4, I don't think that's where talent-wise he necessarily would have been drafted, but he was a better fit because the Kings had this stable of guards in the back where they had a center. And so instead of taking some of the players like Jaden Ivey, who may have been like the more boom or bust prospect, they went with a safer guy. And so far, Murray's had the better year. To get back to your question about Risacher, I think that would be a success if Risacher's first 2 years looked like Keegan Murray's. I think there's a chance he has more ball handling than Keegan Murray because Keegan Murray plays next to De'Aaron Fox. I think if you play Risacher in a team that doesn't have a established guard of the ilk of De'Aaron Fox, he's got the coordination to dribble the ball, but I don't think he's much of a facilitator. And I think Keegan Murray's a better defensive athlete than Risacher. I think Risacher's got the measurables, but he doesn't wow me with his defense. It's more smarts than athleticism, if that makes sense. And I think Keegan Murray has been a really good shooter in his first 2 years in the NBA. He showed the signs at Iowa, and he's so far been very good. Like you said, regressed slightly statistically, but had a larger role. And what impressed me is the volume. And I've got this theory about shooters coming into the draft. I don't think it's free throw percentage. I don't think it's 3-point percentage. What I think matters is the confidence that the coaches instill in you to shoot the ball. And so I think the best shooters typically coming into a draft shoot the most. So in this case, that would be the Peyton Samford of Iowa, ironically enough, or Baylor Shireman or Dalton Connect, I think are better shooters than guys who shot fewer threes but had slightly better percentages.
There was a guy, I don't remember what his name was, apologies to this man, that had a study on three-point shooting success in the NBA and basing on a bunch of different college metrics and three-point attempt. That's why I didn't include three-point percentage because there was like no correlation. But three-point attempt rate was one of the highest things that came across in terms of how successful you can be in the NBA. So that's a really good point. I think that is important. That is why I include it when we're talking about Risacher here. Last thing on Zaccharie before we go. And this is it's impossible to answer, but I'm going to put it out there anyway. Do you think that because of the hype surrounding Victor Wembanyama over the last 2 years, like before he was drafted for a full year into the season, that there has been an overinflation of French prospects? We had Bilal Koulibaly jump right up into the top 7. We're going to have Sarr, Risacher. We're going to have Tidjane Salaam. We're going to have... it's the other guy's name, Pacom Dadier. We're going to have all these guys who may not have had that level of hype or even be draftable in some spots push up because of the we watched a lot of French ball when Victor was over there, or maybe this is the next group of great French players, or is that just no, they're actually just good?
Probably somewhere in between. I know that's a bit of a cop-out answer, but I'll at least defend it. So I think in the case of Bilal Koulibaly, he had traits, but the eyes were on the team he played for because of Victor Wembanyama, and he was a beneficiary of extra attention. And then I think in his case, people tricked themselves into saying, well, he's got these metrics and potential is something we really value in this league. And so defensively, he can do this. He's got positional versatility. But I think based on his actual basketball played up to that point, he probably wasn't warranting a 7th pick. I would say Risacher has been a known commodity for a little while. So I don't think that one has to do that much with Wembanyama, but maybe like Tidjane Salaam, who I actually am starting to warm up to quite a bit, is someone that you say, well, we have this success story of Victor Wembanyama. We saw Koulibaly last year get picked 7th in what was deemed to be a very good class, and now there's one that is devoid of stars, and he's putting up numbers better than Koulibaly. I think there's a bit of a rationalization and a comparison that's given, and maybe the attention was given to French basketball because of Victor Wembanyama, which enlightened people to the depth of talent. But I do think the evaluation this year is just kind of fair on their own basketball, what's derived based off their basketball skill, because there's not that many stars. The college basketball landscape was more based on veterans and teams than individual stars than it has been in years past. Obviously, Dalton Connect would be like kind of the veteran star that stands out as opposed to a Brandon Miller last year, who was a freshman star who stood out with similar stats. And so I think that made more of an emphasis be on international basketball because there were fewer collegiate stars.
Really interesting. We're going to get to some college players in a second. But firstly, today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you are hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the job. That doesn't mean hiring scouts for an NBA team or a GM who doesn't know what he's doing. It's about getting the right person into your business. And the best way to do that is with LinkedIn Jobs. It's not just a job board. It's LinkedIn. You know, there's a billion people, a billion professionals on LinkedIn. So you can put your job right under their noses. They can smell it. They can get into it, and they can really see whether it fits them. And small business owners report that they can get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Is it 86 or 84? No, it's actually 86% of the time. I'll almost shortchange them 2% on that. That is how successful LinkedIn Jobs is. So go ahead and post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That is linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, we're going to do it. We have to talk about this guy. There is a lot of media attention regarding him because, we know who his dad is. This is LeBron James Jr. This is Bronny James, a guy that we didn't even know was going to play this season. Leaf obviously had the heart condition to begin the year, came in, and the numbers, they're not going to wow you. Nobody's going to lie about that, but this is LeBron James's son. He's going to have a lot of attention. So let's just start with some of the basics. He's almost 20. He's 6'2". He's a guard. He obviously doesn't have his dad's size. Played 19 minutes a game, low usage player, got up a lot of threes, very inefficient, 44% field goal percentage, good steal rate. Didn't hit his free throws, much like his dad as well. Let's just get to the basic part of it. If his name was not LeBron James Jr., would he be in discussion to be drafted at all?
No, but I think there wouldn't be much of an issue put forth of him returning to school. I think likely he would have just returned to school, maybe hit the transfer portal, and no one would have thought about it. So I think that there's this unfair pressure of, okay, well, he was expected to be this one and done put on him, and pro basketball may suit his strengths better than what USC did, because USC was a dumpster fire. It really was. They had talented guards, Boogie Ellis and Isaiah Collier, dominating the ball. So, of course, he was going to play off ball. But if you're 6'2" and you're an off ball guard who has a bad shooting year, it really doesn't boost your stock whatsoever. And that's what he dealt with. So to answer your question succinctly, probably not. But I will at least posit this thought of sometimes the name is going to get you a chance, and then that game will get you your second chance. So at the combine, I was there, and I would say he wasn't great by any means, but you could see the way he belonged because athletically he's got the twitchiness, even if he doesn't have the size. He's got the defensive twitchiness that gives him a chance to pressure the ball, but he has to become an excellent defender to make that work because he doesn't have the size to be a wing defender. He's an on-ball defender that's kind of going to take the pest role. And then he went 4 of 10 shooting the ball and made right plays, had a couple turnovers that were just kind of something I would chalk up to not having played with teammates before. He threw a ball over the top of someone who went for a lob. But it was a good look, and he missed good shots. Like the ones he made were good shots. The one he missed were good shots. And in terms of who played well at the combine, I wouldn't say he would be at the top of the list, even though he was on some. That was just because of the name. But he was someone who I thought played better than I kind of anticipated he would. And if you were to rank the players that played at the combine, he would not be dead last whatsoever. And some of the players that played very poorly, there's no negatives being shown their way because their names aren't LeBron James Jr. So I'll at least defend him in that capacity. I probably still wouldn't draft him, but I wouldn't be as appalled if he's drafted as I would have been prior to the combine.
There's no chance he's not getting drafted, is there? Like someone is going to draft him.
I think so. I feel badly for him though, because now no matter what happens, he could be a team could actually like him. And everyone's going to say, oh, now they're just hoping to get LeBron. And maybe there's some truth to that. But it kind of diminishes the fact that, his dreams to play pro basketball, and he's got this unfair thing. So I guess I have a soft spot for him in that regard. But, I do think he finds his name picked in the second round.
There's going to be someone that's definitely commenting or listening and saying to this, don't feel sorry for him. Look at how much money he's got. That's really not the point. Like the guy went through a life-changing, life-threatening situation early this season, and I'm sure it's not easy having your name chucked out in the media like we're doing now. Every 5 minutes someone's talking great about you, talking bad about you, telling you don't deserve to be where you are. It gets to anybody, no matter how much money you're rubbing together at the end of the day. The comps for Bronny I've heard thrown around, it's like those defensive guards, Pat Beverly, DeAnthony Melton types. Let's not sort of ignore that because those are guys who can play some point guard. Can Bronny ever do that, or is he just going to be like an undersized defensive guard who can't ever really sort of run an offense and with dribbling or passing or decision making?
It's too early to tell because you'd have to give him repetitions, and I don't know what level he'd be getting the repetitions at. I don't think it would be in the NBA. If he were to do it in the G League, that would be something. So I do think he's likely a 2 defensively. But I mean, there was good decisions made. I just think it's different being a full-time point guard than it is kind of demonstrating the ability to make good decisions. And the fact that he played with two guards that were as heralded as they were in Boogie Ellis and Isaiah Collier made it hard for him to demonstrate the point guard playmaking as opposed to just supplementary ball handling capacities. So I think he is an undersized two, and he would take a kind of a rehabilitation year of building the game from the point guard standpoint in the G League in order to have any legitimacy to him playing the one in the future.
Last thing on Bronny, a name that just came to my head of the guy that found himself elevated off a two-way into a starting role to end this season, Keon Ellis, a guy that works as a unbelievable defender on that Kings team. The offense comes and goes. Like, is that a similar, like not even pathway, but like where Bronny can work to?
Well, Keon Ellis was a 36 or so % shooter at Alabama when he was there on a pretty good Alabama team. And Keon's a bigger, lengthier body than Bronny. Bronny resembled up close and personal. He resembled like a bigger cornerback or a smaller safety of like an NFL or a cornerback and like a high level college cornerback body. Keon Ellis very much looks like, hey, that guy's a very wiry, defensively oriented basketball player, just in terms of appearance. I saw him up close and personal. I work for the Jazz, for those of you who don't know. And so I watch shoot-arounds a lot, and Keon Ellis has got this like prototypical length. And I watched him a bunch at Alabama. In fact, I actually saw him play at Alabama when I went to March Madness, and he, despite his lack of shooting at the NBA level, was a decent shooter in college, and his length is the difference. I think he's just kind of a longer body, so that's why I would say he's more of a Davion Mitchell of the Kings, of someone who'd have to just kind of fully adhere to tenacity. But I think he could be a better shooter than Davion Mitchell. That said, I think Mitchell had better point guard qualities while he was at Baylor than Bronny demonstrated at USC. No
more Bronny talk. We're going to go on to some other prospects. But today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. With BetterHelp, it's therapy, but we all know that there are certain different things that therapy can be useful for. We have different stresses in our life, big or small. It might be something that happens with our sport team. It might be our team's GM taking Davion Mitchell in the top 10 of a draft when he was already 35 years of age and couldn't shoot. Who knows? Things can get to us at any point. And finding an unbiased way to get things off our chest, well, that's part of what therapy can do. It's a safe space to get those things out and figure out a way to work through whatever it is that is weighing you down. So if you've been thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. You fill out a questionnaire, they match you with a therapist. If that doesn't work out and you don't like your therapist, which honestly happens all the time, you just request a new one and they change it over for you free of charge. Get it off your chest with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedonnba today to get 10% off your first month. That is BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedonnba. All right, we're going to get through the next bunch of these players. We're going to go to Kentucky, and we're going to look at Justin Edwards, a guy, Leaf, who at the start of the season, much like we talked about the early returns or the early thoughts on Zaccharie Risacher, Edwards' name was thrown out by people as maybe this guy in a weak class is the number one overall pick. And now I can't think of a prospect with more crickets associated with their name than Edwards at the moment. Like, first of all, like he's at Kentucky, we know there's a thing that has happened for years and years and years of players at Kentucky's minutes, roles, skills, stats, whatever being somewhat suppressed. How much of the Edwards disappearance is a Kentucky-related thing, or is it just like, oh, maybe we just got it wrong heading into college?
I think people are wrong because if you listen to Locked On NBA Big Board, I make this point frequently. If you watch his high school tape, he didn't do anything that resembled the guys you typically associate with even top 10 picks, much less number one picks. What he did was he was stronger than guys, but he was a 20-year-old senior in high school. And he was stronger, and so he bullied his way to the rim. But there was no finesse. There was no explosion. So you had to be like an unbelievable athlete to have that lack of skill put you even in that conversation. So I thought it was crazy to have him even in the top 10 entering this year. So maybe I was in the minority in that assessment. But as I watched him play for Kentucky, I kept thinking to myself, man, he can't dribble. He can't shoot. Like there's these things. But he turned into a decent shooter. Like his shot came around. He shot 38%, but I think he was kind of a dare shooter for a decent amount of that. And then you'd say, okay, well, if he can shoot 38% and he had those accolades coming out of high school, maybe there's a kind of that reclamation project pathway for him to be a good player. in the NBA as a 3-and-D, rather than a star, but a 3-and-D. And I would argue that his 32-inch max vertical would demonstrate the athletic lack of prowess. And then the shooting, like I said, I don't think is all that great. So you'd really have to believe in his being older, being more ready to contribute than I think he is, because typically when you draft someone that's older, they've played a lot of college basketball, they're more well defined, their roles are more clear. So I'm pretty out on Justin Edwards. I thought athletically he'd have to test spectacularly to put himself back within that first round range that some people had him in. I think his shot looked better in person than I anticipated it doing, but I'd be pretty hesitant to use a first round pick on Justin Edwards.
His field goal, strong, good free throws, good 3-point attempt rate. He's not a high usage player. The age thing is something that I bang on about all the time when you talk about it as an older player beating up on high schoolers, like as a freshman who's going to be 21 when the NBA season starts. Like, this stuff matters. Like, it's all context related. I say that a lot about some of the guys who are going to be like 23 playing against 18-year-olds in college. Like, if you're not beating them up, like, what are you doing? Then you shouldn't be even anywhere near this discussion of being a draftable player. That's what you're expected to. It's like a third-year player playing summer league. Like, if you don't dominate, then we're going to have some questions. And that is a pretty sizable red flag in a lot of these scenarios for someone, like a Justin Edwards or whichever other player it is. There are certain guys that always stick in my head as these highly regarded high school players, preseason top 5 picks, who then coincidentally all seem to have the same sort of measurables as what Justin Edwards does here, and they do nothing. And the two that mainly come to mind at the moment for me are Cam Reddish and Nasir Little, who both came in with really high rankings heading into college. Both did really nothing at a college level. Both still got drafted in the first round, and I would say that the way that they played in college has represented how maybe they didn't deserve that first round pick, and they're playing the NBA is not quite there. Is that a similar sort of, like, again, we're talking like shapes of pathways of guys. Do you see a similar sort of thing there with Edwards, of that high school ranking being so sticky that it just keeps giving that extra chance that others wouldn't get?
I think in the case of Cam Reddish, he committed to a team in Duke that had players that were at similar positions that were better than him, and that stunted his growth, and more importantly, probably stunted his confidence. And in the case of Nasir Little, I think he's a better athlete than Justin Edwards, but Edwards is a better shooter and taller. Nasir Little was probably a power forward at his entire life, and then ended up being 6'6", and it's not all that useful in the NBA. I do think Edwards is going to get chances because he's with Clutch Sports. I think going to Kentucky gets you some leeway from NBA teams, and his prowess in high school is going to say, okay, well, maybe he can kind of find some of that again. And I think there is something to be said that high school tape needs to be evaluated. Like, I really like Jaden McDaniels, and now it's easy to take a victory lap over that, but I've been complaining for years as a Jazz fan that that's who I really wanted, even more than Desmond Bane, because that's what the Jazz needed at that time. Well, if you looked at Jaden McDaniels, like, yes, his shooting's not been good, but you knew there was offensive talent if you watched him in high school, and you knew there was this athleticism despite what he showed at Washington. Washington was different because he was a zone player. So I think there is credence to high school tape, but I don't think his high school tape actually shows things that are helpful to an NBA thing. So yes, maybe he does get an extra view because he was a good high school recruit, but I think his stock's going to drop because of his lack of athleticism unless he shoots the cover off the ball at team workouts.
You mentioned Washington, so we're going to go up to the Pacific Northwest now. We're going to talk about Jaylen Wells at Washington State, another wing player, 6'8". He's going to be 21 just after the draft. We're talking about a guy here, again, that size is strong, like 6.5 rebounds per 40, 18 points, 20 usage, nice 3-point attempt rate, solid free throw shooter, really good assist to turnover rate, even though he's not like a high assist player at all. He just didn't turn it over. So basically, if you look at a usage 20 with no turnovers, no assists, you're talking about a guy that's basically just shooting sort of spot ups. What's his role? He's got the size, obviously that's that prototypical size, and that's when we talk about. I feel like when we talk about guys in that 25 to 40 range, it's like a 6'7" to 6'9". Then let's just see what happens, because if they work, and every NBA team needs that. And there's just a bunch of players in that mix basically every year, and I feel like Wells is fitting into that area there. So what's his what's his calling card? I think that's one of the things I want to look at in this draft where it is considered weaker, but players are going to have strength. So when an NBA team goes, I'm picking this guy because this, like, what's his thing?
Well, he's a guy that, unless you're really a total college basketball nerd like myself, you probably didn't see too much of. Like, Washington State was a 7 seed, but for much of the year they were like hidden even from people who live in the Pacific time zone. What he's good at is he played well versus the best teams that they could have played. Like when they beat Arizona, both times they beat Arizona, he was good. He had 27 in one of those games, hit big shots, had his best games against the best athletes. So that meant a lot to scouts. His shot is a strength, but it does come out a little funny. Like his spin is not a typical like backspin. There's a kind of a side spin mixed with the backspin. It's not a knuckleball like maybe Cody Williams or Matas Buzelis were shooting, but his ball does spin a little weirdly, but he shoots it well. He's sizable, like you said, and that's a combination that warrants a look. Like he, along with another Jalen Bridges at Baylor, are two guys that I think stocks probably rose a little bit at the combine because they shot well in an event where most players shot poorly. And it's sometimes that simple. If you shoot well in those type of settings, people give you additional glances. I'll give you an example. Ben Shepherd last year, I was at the combine. I knew who he was. The scouts knew who he was, but no one in their right minds at that point, I mean, that I spoke to at least, had him ranked even within the top 30. And he ends up being a first-round pick and plays in the playoffs for a team that's in the Eastern Conference Finals. So shooting well gives extra looks, and I guess it's so far, at least in my experience of these past 2 years, it's worked out for people. So I wouldn't imagine that Jaylen Wells will sneak his way to the first round, but I do think he'll end up being drafted, even though I think if you'd asked a lot of draft people before the season who he was, very few could give you a straightforward answer saying they knew who he was because he went to JUCO before that.
What's defensively? Does he hold up, or is it just all going to come down to shooting?
That's a tricky one because they played a zone at Washington State. So I think athletically he's solid, but I can't give you that confident of an answer that he'll be a great NBA man-to-man defender.
All right, I don't think we need to talk too much more about Jaylen Wells, to be honest. Like, he's there, he's a shooter, he's got the size, he's a little bit older, as you said, coming across from the JUCO route. Let's go now to Dillon Jones. Small school prospect, Weber State, a guy whose numbers are going to jump off the page with anybody who looks at them now. I did a bit of work on him last year. I think I talked with Rich about Dillon Jones yesterday when I talked to him, because this is a guy that I thought was going to stay in the draft last season. He is basically everything for this Weber State team. He's 22 now. He's a 6'6" wing, but like 11 rebounds, 6 assists, over 2 steals, 24 points per 40 minutes. Like, they're insane numbers. He had a 30 usage rate. He had 1.7 assist to turnover. He hit his free throws. He did everything. But is this just a case of you are the guy on a small team, you are doing everything for this team, you're a bit undersized, not sure always the shot's going to be there to the degree it needs to be there, and then he gets somewhat lost in the NBA? Or the name that I threw out to Rich when we just briefly discussed Dillon the other day was, with this ability to be this undersized, sort of hard-nosed player, we've seen the success that Josh Hart is having at the moment. Is there a way that Jones could sort of pull that usage back and just be this defender, ball mover, aggressive rebounder, and a like elite level role player type of guy?
I don't see it for Dillon Jones, and I know I'm going to get some flack because I am from Utah. I've seen Dillon Jones play a lot, and in college games, he's been dominant in some big games. Like, they played St. Mary's, some of the better teams that Weber State played against. He had good games, but I watch him against other NBA hopefuls at the combine the last 2 years, and he, to me, stands out as someone who doesn't have a role, and other players may be trying too hard to fit different levels of, hey, this is what the scouts want for me, I'm going to play like this, and they don't do very well at it. He's playing his role, and he's doing the best he can at it, but I just don't see it working out at the NBA level because he, to me, is a not very good athlete compared to NBA players. I don't think he's a very good shooter compared to NBA players, and he's just dominated against inferior competition. And so he's trying to play as a role player when he's been a star. And sometimes that works really well. There's been numerous occasions where a star can transition down and become a valuable role player. There's been numerous occasions where someone can be a role player and it's the same role. And there's some where a guy, even turns from a role player to star, but I just don't see his working out because he doesn't shoot it convincingly enough for me to believe in him as a shooter. I don't think he's the athlete that you liken him to in Josh Hart. I'm not saying that's like your perfect comp or anything. I'm just saying for the listeners, Josh Hart flies like a rocket and goes after rebounds. I don't think Dillon Jones does that against that level of athletes. What he does is he positions himself well, he uses a strong body, but I don't think his strength is something that's going to be that valuable against NBA level athletes. And then he likes the ball in his hands to facilitate, but I don't see him being able to facilitate because he won't create advantages athletically off the dribble or with strength burrowing into the defense like he does at Weber State against the Big Sky competition. So I had this discussion with Richard at the Combine this year. I had the same discussion with him last year. I want to root for Dillon Jones, but my eyes don't see it. I hope I'm wrong, but I'm pretty low on him.
Because you look at the numbers and you go, well, they're huge, but it's the context is important. I don't know if you've seen this site. I only just sort of came across it today. It's just NBA draftcomp.herokuapp.com, right? And it compares guys just a bunch per 40 numbers, advanced numbers, physical numbers to show their closest similarities. And I put Dillon Jones into there. Not every prospect is in there, but I put Dillon Jones in there. And the name that came up should be harrowing to people, I guess, especially Bulls fans. Chandler Hutchison was the top name that came up as an advanced comp, and second was Norris Cole. So I wouldn't say those guys were particularly successful. And Chandler Hutchison's a really interesting one because he put up all those numbers: strong rebounding, good passing, good scoring at Boise State, and then just absolutely had no chance of hanging in the NBA once he got there. So is that like how for stuff that's like a algorithmic statistical comparison? Like, does that sound far off to you?
I mean, that makes sense to me in the sense that he's a good player at a lot of things, but a master of none. And at the NBA level, if you're going to be good at a lot of things, you got to be some sort of spectacular athlete. And I don't see him of that. Or you have to be a master of something like shooting. And he's not a master of shooting, and he's not a master of passing, in my opinion. So I think he might be one of those guys who's kind of in between levels. I think he could be good in the G League. I just don't see it at the NBA level athletically, nor from a skill set wise of shooting or passing, which are the ways that you can make it if you're not that level athlete. You have to have some tremendous guile and like a way to stick. And I just don't see that pathway. And like I said, I hope I'm wrong, but for 2 straight years, I felt like he's been a fish out of water at the Combine.
Well, there you have it. Leaf Thulin hates Utah. One player left to go, and that is Trey Alexander from Creighton, a guy, again, whose name was in the draft last season and I thought was a chance to maybe go late in the first round. And as happens a lot of times, I feel, maybe this is probably completely anecdotal, but I do feel a lot of times that these guys go back to school and they hope they're going to come out and improve their stock and really jump up. And I just have heard nothing about Trey Alexander this season at all. Like, no buzz, no noise, no nothing. He's just disappeared, where he could have been a first-round pick maybe last season, or at least a top 40 pick, I would say. And I've just heard nothing. Now, is that just me being, I guess, out of that deep college basketball circle? But I've heard nothing from this guy. 21 years of age, 6'4", wing guard, played a ton of minutes, shot some threes, good from the line, decently efficient. Like, the numbers are fine. 5 assists per 40 is definitely a bit eye-opening. But what was his season like compared to what he was the year before?
Well, the difference between this year and last year, statistically, it won't jump out to you, is last year there was a point guard by the name of Ryan Nembhard at Creighton on the Elite Eight team. He transferred to Gonzaga. So even though you're going to see Trey Alexander listed as a shooting guard, he was the point guard at Creighton this past year. And so the difference he was trying to prove to scouts is that he could play as a kind of a larger point guard as opposed to an adequately sized 2 guard. And I think there was mixed results. I think that Creighton didn't have the same level of talent this year, but when they were clicking as best as they could with what I would deem as an inferior talented team as compared to the year prior, he was kind of the reason for it. He was the catalyst. He could score in the mid-range, create for others, did learn to play pick and roll very well with Ryan Kalkbrenner, who was the center for Creighton. Baylor Shireman was on the team. He was probably the best player on that team, was a 3rd-team All-American and 1st-team All-Big East performer. And he learned to feed those type of players along with the 2 starters that joined the lineup along with the trio of veterans there due to the departures of Arthur Kaluma and Ryan Nembhard. And I would say there's mixed results as a point guard, but I would say the fact that he was able to lead his team to a 3 seed, a Sweet 16 as a point guard, proved that he's capable in that regard. I think he's really good at getting into the middle and shooting mid-range jump shots, creating for himself. Defensively, he has a 6'10" wingspan, can guard 1 through 3, I think. I would be more confident 1 and 2s, but he's got the size to guard a 3. And he took and made a lot of tough shots, both big-time shots. Sometimes his numbers, I think, in terms of percentages are going to look worse, even though they still look fine, than the level of shooter that he is. I don't think he's a great catch and shoot guy, but he's got the capacity to make tough shots, which means he has the capacity to make easy ones. So I'm actually probably higher than the consensus on Alexander because there's a lot of context that I don't think a lot of people appreciate with him and the changes of his game. But I think if you put him as a 1 or a 2, I think he's got a pathway towards success.
He was a guy I was pretty interested in last season. I thought he was a nice little late riser as a interesting sort of shooting player. I didn't really think much about the point guard stuff. Obviously, that's what he transitioned towards this season. And sometimes, even if that's not what ends up being the player's position, having that year of experience doing that can be really helpful in terms of just developing secondary skills. And if I go back to that advanced player comp thing, the 2 guys who came out as the highest comps were a guy in this draft class, Bub Carrington, but also after that, Chris Middleton, Ty Washington, Kobe White. These guys who are sort of, Middleton's the secondary ball handler for the Bucks for plenty of the time that he's been there. Kobe White has played some shooting guard and point guard, obviously plays next to Zach LaVine, plays next to other guards. You've got Ty Washington, who's played the sort of combo guard role at Kentucky as well. So those are names that are all like, there's a little bit of interestingness regarding a bunch of different advanced stats for what those guys did in college. So he's not super old. He's 21. I think I would like it if he was just a little bit taller. But the way I look at it, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Leaf, I see his game as being moldable, but also scalable. Like, you need to do more. You need to do less. Can you go and do this today? Can you go and shoot? Can you go and pass? Can you go and distribute? Can you go and defend? Can you go and do this? Just filling in little bits and pieces and bits of gaps. And if you focus on one thing, you become really good at it for a couple of years. And if you need me to do something else, I'll do that. That's sort of how I viewed him a bit last year. I view him more of that this way, just the ability to sort of adjust to what a team needs. He's never going to be this, the best or second best player on an NBA team. Like, he's not going to be that guy. But as a valuable role player, I think that he's got that ability, I think, to just do a bunch of different things.
Yeah, I like that because I think at various points of his career where people have been the highest on him, it's been when he's taken on a new challenge. Like last year, he was the scorer for an Elite 8 team. This year, he's the point guard, and when they played their best, he was getting others involved. His freshman year, if you really want to go back all the way, Ryan Nembhard broke his wrist, and as a freshman, he played the team Kansas that won it all with Ochai Agbaji, Christian Brown, some veteran wings, and he had them within a 2-point game with 2 minutes left as a freshman playing point guard when he's played 2 guard all year. So I really think he's got this variability to his game. He can do enough of the different things well. And this just popped in my head. I've never thought of this before, but he kind of reminds me a little bit of what Nickeil Alexander-Walker was coming out of Virginia Tech.
Yep, I can see that. Alexander Walker's been
I really
like
like Nickeil Alexander-Walker with the Utah Jazz. So now he's becoming a very valuable NBA player. And I'm not saying that Trey Alexander's exactly the same, but they remind me of one another.
Alexander Walker's a really interesting player because you don't see what he did or what he has done happen very often. A guy that comes in as this tall point guard who's like, bro, can you stop taking a million bad shots? Like, what is going on? Why is this high usage guy? I'm not sure he's ever going to get it. The shot's not there. He's going, all right, screw that. Now I'm just going to become a unbelievable perimeter defender. It's like shooting, like, don't worry about it anymore. I'm not going to do that. It's just a wild change, but that's, again, the thing that we talk about. Like, what do you need at the moment? What can you work on next? Like, you want me to do this? Right, I gotcha. I'm going to figure that out. And that's, again, the sort of thing I see there. Now, yeah, he's there. I'm always big on this unconscious bias stuff, Leaf, and I have it. Like, initially when I was looking at Trey Alexander last season, I go, Trey, can you shoot like Trey Murphy? Because I hear the name. And then I see Alexander Walker. Is there an unconscious thing that jumps in there as well? But who cares? In the end, if he's able to transition and do all these different things, I think it's going to be really interesting. So he's someone I am, again, in a class like this, his ability to, I don't say he's got no weaknesses, but his weaknesses seem less pronounced than a bunch of other players that are going to go higher than him.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. There are deficiencies to his game, but they're not like absolute like pummels your career trajectory type of deficiencies. And I even felt that way about Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Just a short aside, when he was with the Jazz, he was shooting poorly, but there was a lot of internal discussion between, media members, and probably discussion as well, which player is more valuable, he or Talen Horton-Tucker to keep for the long run. And I was firmly on Nickeil Alexander-Walker's side because, well, you know what? If Talen Horton-Tucker is going to ever pan out, which personally I don't think he will, it means that he's going to have the ball. And no team's going to be good if he has to have the ball. Whereas Nickeil Alexander-Walker will defend, he'll pass, and if his shot comes around, which it has even a little bit for Minnesota, he's a valuable player. And so I didn't expect him to take this leap that he's taken, but I think Trey Alexander has similar qualities that I think he's a better, more natural scorer. Defensively, he can figure out ways to impact the game. And that's just enough. 3 years of high-level college basketball of figuring it out in different roles means something to me.
Yeah, we had a running joke on this show that every time that Talen Horton-Tucker didn't play, the Jazz would win. And I think that's as much as we need to say about where I view him as a player in the NBA long term, or even in the very, very short term. Leaf. That'll bring us to the end of this batch of prospects. So once again, thank you for coming on and chatting with us. Big names, small names, interesting names across the NBA draft landscape. What have you guys got going on over at Locked On NBA Big Board? And are you still doing Locked On Jazz at the moment, filling in for David?
I just finished my 2 weeks of doing that, but I'll have another week coming up soon filling in for David. As for Big Board, there's going to be a lot of kind of discussions about, okay, this year you want a safe pick versus a high potential guy, and there's going to be kind of a roundtable episodes of varying viewpoints between myself, Richard Stamen, James Barlow, and how we would draft in terms of this draft being viewed differently from our perspective than previous drafts. And coming up for the next episode is going to be, okay, well, the history says drafting old players is kind of a dangerous proposition to do. So James Barlow and I are going to discuss this year's class of older players featuring Dalton Knecht, Baylor Shireman, and a few others. And we're going to say, do we think they'll be anomalies or follow the trend?
I'm very much into that. I'm very much into the age stuff and when players break out in college, and is it age related? Is it development stuff? Because I find it really intriguing. So I am going to be tuning in for that one. So Leaf, thank you for jumping on and chatting NBA draft with us, and we'll catch you over at Locked On NBA Big Board.
Thank you. Appreciate the invite.
And that does bring us to the end of this show. What did you think about our discussions on Risacher, on Bronny, on Jaylen Wells, on Justin Edwards? How high would you go with Risacher? My first mock, I had him low, outside the top 10. But like I've said a million times, like who knows what's going to happen with this draft? You want to take him at 2? I wouldn't, but it's going to be hard to argue. It's a very weird class. There's going to be weird things that happen. And the weirdest thing that you can do to be a part of this draft class is hit the thumbs up on this video. It's just subscribe to the... Subscribe? That's not the right word. Subscribe is the word. You can do that audio and video style as well. And guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.